standards in the vacation rental industry is different than hotels, first of all. You can wake up in a Hyatt in Tokyo or Cincinnati and not know where you are, right? It's very cookie cutter. Guests choose vacation rentals because they want to feel like a local, right? They want to go to a beach house and feel like they're on the beach, or a mountain home and feel like they're in the mountains. But they don't want uniqueness when it comes to sleeping, bathing, and eating. They don't want a round bed or a water bed. They want comfortable beds. And so I think multi-generational travelers, the families, they want some certainty when it comes to the comfort of the stay.
What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, founder, speaker, strategy expert, and merchandising executive. She has over 13 years of merchandising and e-commerce experience at major brands like Tiffany & Co. and the company store. She brings a deep expertise in guest experience with a special focus on the vacation rental industry. She's been a featured speaker at leading industry events, including the Vacation Rental Women's Summit and the Vacation Rental Management Association Executive Summit. She's the founder and CEO of Inhaven. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ashley Ching. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi, Dan. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. And I just want our listeners to know how we came to be at this moment. So a few weeks ago, I interviewed Sebastian from Spain, who's in the vacation rental space. And I haven't really paid attention to that space so much because it's, I would say hospitality. It is hospitality, but it's not like it's hospitality adjacent as far as hotels go, right? And what really struck me was how he is kind of confined geographically because he wants to deliver the best service that he can, right? And so I think they have 400 and something units in and around Barcelona, Spain, and that's what they do. And if they grow, they're going to grow. They need to build a whole new beachhead somewhere else and then get to a certain level of scale. So that got me thinking about the short-term vacation rental market. And then I came across a case study that had to do with, well, what my big takeaway, and I don't want to ruin it because there's so much work that went in, but my big takeaway was there's these ideas of an economy of scale and a diseconomy of scale. And I never heard the words diseconomy of scale before, but an economy of scale for the listeners is when your costs and overhead kind of stay the same, but your revenue increases, right? So you have scale, more money drops to the bottom line, you become way more efficient. And the example that you used in there, I think was ball jar. Well, they used to be jars. Now it's just packaging.
Corp. Yep.
Ball Corp. So in Indiana, they'll create a production line to make a new kind of packaging that it's a tremendous upfront investment. But when that thing gets humming and it's fully efficient, it costs almost nothing to make each widget that comes out of it. And I remember seeing Elon Musk speak about it once when he was talking about SpaceX, and he's talking about manufacturing, especially whether it's Tesla or spaceships, that if you make enough of something through a manufacturing process, the cost to produce can almost get to zero. And that is a true economy of scale, right? So then you have revenue and then just pure profit after that. But what was interesting, and you in this case study, you showed how in hospitality, because they're so complicated, there's different levels of service, there's a tremendous amount of people, there can be a diseconomy of scale, which can rear up and bite you. And oftentimes people and companies follow this path of scale for the sake of scale. And then they wind up having to go Chapter 11, close their doors. And that actually just happened last week as well. Although that wasn't in your case study, because then you'd be like a fortune teller. But I want to describe this because it's been super fascinating to me about how to grow and deliver service, you kind of have to stay within your lane to do the best that you can and then grow from there organically. But before we get into all of that, Ashley, because I feel like I've been talking way too much, but I'm very excited about this conversation because of that case study and recent events that just happened in this space. What does hospitality mean to you, and how do you define it?
Hospitality to me is really an expression of honor. It's how you honor yourself, your team, your guests, and your ancestors. So really, it's all about the details, how you show up, how in vacation rental space, you can show your hospitality through how the bed is made, through how the home is stocked, how you show up when really no one is watching. That is to me, that defines hospitality.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that. And then if I will go back to one of the slides in your case study, and maybe if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening, maybe watch on YouTube, but because we'll do our best to drop the slides in there. But there's this one, it's your typical kind of X and Y axis with a 45-degree line that on one end of the line, if I remember correctly, it's been a month or so, but like all the way to the left, there is like Four Seasons, let's say. And all the way to the right, once you get to that scale, and on the X axis might have been number of units and the Y axis was level of service, maybe. But you get all the way out to the end of that. I forget what it was. It was a house rental company, which basically there were so many, but they did nothing. Like if your boiler breaks, they'll come fix it.
There's zero service, practically zero service.
Right. And if I remember in the case study, there were like little bar graphs that went along the Y axis that showed how many units there might have been by and how geographically spread they were. And somehow Four Seasons was like the best example. There were other really great examples, but then as you got bigger, your service has to decrease. So walk us through that slide, and we'll get it up here in the YouTube. But walk us through that, and what was your finding, and then how does that relate to companies who are like, you know what, we're scaling, we're going to have thousands of units, and we're going to do everything that we can. But you tell your story.
I think there's this whole narrative right now that bigger is better. And in hospitality, it actually cannot be. And which, is why the case study came to fruition was really these near concurrent events of the largest property management companies in both the hotel and the vacation rental space failing at the same time. We had Ambridge Hospitality on the hotel side and Vacasa on the vacation rental side.
And at the same time.
At the very same time. So within 3 weeks.
Just give us a timestamp of when that was, so that we can get our heads around that. And then also, if you can just give us an idea of when they decided to switch the button or flip the switch to scale for the sake of scaling, like how long, because that was another slide in there. It showed that when Vacasa and Ambridge decided to grow, it was the same. I don't remember if it was the same time. It must have been the same time.
Very similar time periods. Yeah.
But it was, they followed the same trajectory to close down. It was crazy.
Yeah. So essentially, at the end of last year, so at the end of December, Vacasa announced its distress sale to the Casago consortium. Vacasa is the largest property manager on the vacation rental side. At the time, they were at their peak, they were managing about 44,000 properties. And what was really interesting is just 3 weeks later, Ambridge announced its out-of-court bankruptcy restructuring. And Ambridge, being the largest hotel property manager, at their peak, they were managing about 1,500 properties. And so, we started to look into this to say, is it just a coincidence, these near concurrent events, or is there a story here? And so as we look back at their history of their journeys, their corporate journeys. And they went through these same 5 key distinct phases at relatively the same time, which was really fascinating. So to your point earlier, they started, in the early 2000s with organic growth. Vacasa started with just 1 unit in Portland, Oregon. And they grew really organically for their first, 5-10 years of being in business. And then they started to raise money and do private equity backed M&A deals that really helped them grow significantly.
And when was that?
That was for Ambridge. It was around 2013. They did their first deal. And for Vacasa, it was around 2016.
Wow. Okay. So that was like also the dangers of inexpensive leverage, right? It's like, that's like it. Wow. It's like, I don't know what that was. It's like cocaine is a hell of a drug from some movie, but it's like low interest rates are a hell of a drug.
Yes. So they went out and they started to grow through acquisition. And there's a lot of lessons learned about the negatives of growing through acquisition. They grew sort of quickly. Both of them.
That was from a Dave Chappelle sketch, by the way, with when he played, I can't remember who. That was really funny. I just had a Dave Chappelle moment there. He played Rick James. Oh my God, that was hilarious.
And then, yeah. And then in 2019, that's when they both went elephant hunting. So they raised some pretty significant money. And Vacasa acquired Wyndham Vacation Rentals and Turnkey, which took them from about 9,000 or a little under 11,000 units to about 44,000 at their peak in just a 3-year period of time. And then Ambridge at the same time in 2019, they raised capital to buy the number 2 property manager, Interstate Hotels. And so they went from about 800 units to 1,500. And so during the same, 2019 to 2021 time period, they grew very significantly. And that's when then churn started to happen and the business model just became too complex and they started to lose and run out of money. And so that's really, they entered their phase of churn and then they both kind of entered their distressed sale or distressed financial phase at the same time in 2024.
Do you think, like, if in 2019 when they were raising all this capital and debt and leverage and equity to go on this kind of hockey stick growth path, if they knew that COVID was coming and all the support that COVID brought to hotel owners, because a lot of hotel owners, as dire as it got, they were able to shift the goalposts. I think a lot of people going into that didn't know. Do you think if going into COVID, if they knew if COVID happened and they knew all that support, do you think that they still would have gone on with that path?
Good question. I don't know, if they would have changed trajectories, but COVID was actually a pretty good thing for the vacation rental space. Suddenly work from home. So, companies flourished in the vacation rental space during COVID.
But not necessarily hotels. But hotels were able to like renegotiate things with their banks and move goalposts and just tack on time to the end of their debt service agreements. So I'm just curious. Yeah, it's just a interesting hypothetical that we'd never know.
Well, and one of the things that, when you look at the media narrative of why these failures happened, one of the reasons that the media will say it's the leadership teams or the CEOs, but we know that 15 different CEO and leadership teams have tried to solve for scaling property management nationally and have all failed. They talk about it was private equity money or the money, but we see failures on both the public and the private space. And then they talk about exogenous events like COVID, but lots of companies were successful and were able to weather through events like COVID and 9/11. So we knew that there was something deeper here, something more structural. And so what we did was we set out and we interviewed um, hundreds of executives across the restaurant, hotel, and vacation rental space to understand, what makes for successful property management and why do failures occur. And we were able to glean all of these insights, but one of our favorite insights was around diseconomies of scale. And why. Yeah, go ahead.
I've never heard of diseconomy of scale. Did you make that up or did that come from these conversations? Like, I've never heard of that. I've never heard that term, but I could also just be dumb.
I don't think we made it up, but I think it was a new concept. I don't think we talk about it at all in the hospitality space.
I think we should talk about it, not just in hospitality, but all businesses. One of the stories that I share is, I've been an entrepreneur since 2 weeks before September 11th, and maybe even before in college. But I found at some point I got hooked into, like, we were talking about traction, and you can talk about that in a little bit, but there's all this, I call it business porn literature, where it's like scale, 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 grow, grow, grow. And you get surrounded by these peers in entrepreneurs organizations or YPO. And it becomes like this keeping up with the Joneses to grow for the sake of growth. And then it doesn't work out as well, at least in my experience. And then, you're forced to pivot, shit happens. And then I read a book by this guy, Burlingham. It's called Small Giants. I talk about it a lot on this because I wish I read that book early in my career, because it said, you don't have to grow for the sake of growth. And he gave 8 or 10 case studies of companies that just stayed small and did the best that they could do, and they thrived. And whether it was geographically, whether it was like what in the product or widget that they were making, or some super torqued down niche, but being great and small is really awesome too. So I just wanted to like editorialize that there as you get into continue your story.
Yeah. So, as we started to study these hospitality companies, we looked at a comp. And you mentioned Ball Corp. So Ball Corp is the largest manufacturer of aluminum cans in the world. You can set up one line, which is very expensive to your point earlier to set up. But this one production line, which requires only 18 people, can produce up to 1 billion cans a year. So whether you're producing 100,000 cans a year or 1 billion, you only require 18 people. So the more cans you make, the unit economics gets better, right? There's no additional cost to that.
And that's the true definition of scale. That's what scale is.
Yes. And then we, on the flip side, when we were thinking about the service or hospitality industry, we looked at a school district outside of Dallas. It's the Forney in the Forney School District, and they are one of the fastest growing school districts in the country. So they went from about 8,500 students in 2013 to over 18,000 students this year.
Wow.
And so, they needed to maintain that student to teacher ratio, right? That's really important, of like, one student to every 20, one teacher to every 20 students. And so as they grew their student count, their staffing count actually grew at a faster rate, because you needed to maintain the same student to teacher ratios. You then need to hire, as you hire more teachers, you need more management, you need to different program. You need to invest in programs like special ed and art and music. You just need more, more things for the school district. And so and we see this similar trajectory in hospitality as well.
On the school district side, so Ball, it's a business, right? It's profitable. They invest and they dial it out, and they'll squeeze every ounce of juice out of that lemon on that line to make it supremely efficient. With schools, it's not a business. So the schools don't go bankrupt, right? So they have to keep going, and they have the mechanism, I guess, to raise taxes, or whether it be, well, I guess in Texas, there's no income, but maybe just property taxes just go up and up and up to support it. But that model works. Would you consider that Forney school district, is by whatever metrics, is that a successful school district?
I mean, I think it's just your typical finding in schools in general. I think that's just as you grow your student base, you need to maintain those same student to teacher ratios. You need to invest in more programs for the students. And that's very similar to what we see in hospitality. As you grow the number of properties under management, you need more people to support that, to be able to deliver on the service levels. So,
but unlike a school, you have equity and debt partners that require returns. And if that doesn't happen, then people are getting kicked out of their Sonders like they were last week.
yes, exactly. Yep. So, and then we looked at it also from a diseconomies of scale on just the costs, right? So economies of scale, the whole idea of it, as you get bigger, you can negotiate, you get better purchasing agreements, right? And so that works with Ball when 55% of their costs are in materials. So when you are, negotiating your cost of materials and aluminum goes down, that can have a very significant impact to your bottom line. Now, on the hospitality side, 55% of your costs are in labor. So labor is your biggest cost driver. But as you get bigger, people expect better salaries, better benefits. You now are, you've got, you're subject to organized labor, all these things. So it actually becomes more expensive from a labor perspective as you grow and get bigger, because the expectations become higher. And so, by negotiating, being able to negotiate, better software costs or whatnot, the impact on the bottom line isn't as big as your labor. And so we don't see the economies of scale in the cost structure like we do on the manufacturing side of things.
And then that's probably further compounded in certain cities like maybe New York and LA, just to give an example, where you have unions and mandated minimum wages and contract renewals for said unions that, they're pretty smart, and they time them at a place where they have ultimate leverage for those contract renegotiations.
Right. Exactly.
Ball Corp is a perfect example of an economy of scale. The school system, the Forney School District, is exhibit A of a diseconomy of scale, but there's not really a danger zone, so much to speak, unless people start fleeing Texas or their school district. But with hospitality, you have requirements to meet debt service and give a return to investors. So that is where it could implode badly. So, and in the case of Vacasa and also Ambridge, that's clear as day. Are there other examples in hospitality where that happened? I know I just made a reference to one, but
Well, Sonder, yeah. So Sonder just, that's very fresh. They just went straight to Chapter um, 11 bankruptcy and liquidation, and that just happened, last week when they announced that straight to Chapter 7. And they managed about 9,700 units across, 40 different markets. Again, and so when we look at scale, we think about you can scale if your business model isn't as complex, but the more complex your business model is, the harder it is to scale. And so we found that Vacasa and people like Sonder and Ambridge had incredibly complex business models. So we can put up a slide here on just a rubric that we created for this case study, the complexity rubric. But there's different metrics that go into that complexity score. And so, one of them is elevated guest services. So if you're trying to deliver on guest services like Ambridge, like Sonder, like Vacasa, and you're trying to deliver an elevated guest service, that makes it complex, right? That's already one layer of complexity. Then you layer that in. The next metric is varying guest demand drivers. Well, when you're in so many different countries or so many different cities and types of markets, you're going to have different types of guests. And to try to attract all these different guests from a marketing perspective, from an experience perspective, it's very difficult. And so the more varying demand drivers you have, the more complex your business model is. Another example is just distance between locations. So I know that you spoke to another vacation rental company that's very focused on Barcelona. Great. That's really one location. You can scale a location, because you've got the density there. But these companies are all over the place, right? And so, that adds to complexity. And then, you look at the number of owners, and in Vacasa's case, they had potentially over 40,000 different owners to appease. And that was actually one of my most interesting findings from the case study, is that I think no one talks about, that we heard.
that's, what, as you're saying that, it pops in my brain. It's a Seinfeld episode. I'm so TV oriented. I haven't watched Seinfeld in forever, but it was when Jerry's dad was like flipping out because he had to deal with the Boca Vista condo or HOA or condominium board. But I can imagine for Vacasa, it's the same thing, but you're dealing with 40,000 homeowners. Like, I can't even imagine how to get everyone aligned on what would constitute alignment or a good job, or where everyone's feeling like yeah, that's crazy.
Totally. We use this example a lot because this is just a great example to contrast, the Vacasa story. But, we spoke to a company called the Pappas Group, the Pappas Restaurant Group. They own a bunch of restaurants in the Texas and Midwest markets. Pappasitos, Pappados. Don't know if you've ever dined at one of their locations, but, they talked about, they had gotten feedback that in their Dallas market, the bathrooms were substandard. And so the executive team traveled to Dallas and visited all of the locations and confirmed, yes, their standards in their bathrooms are substandard and they needed to make a change. And so over the weekend, they decided to replace all the general managers with the assistant general managers, sending a clear message to the entire organization that if you do not meet our standards, we will replace you and we'll make sure that, everyone.
Oh, and it wasn't from an architectural perspective, like they wanted nicer tile. It just wasn't clean.
No, it wasn't as clean as they expected. And so they were able to make this very swift, decisive change because they own and they manage all of their restaurants. Now, if you have a problem, Vacasa, which Vacasa had lots of problems, and you need to make changes to your organization, but you've got to get over 40,000 owners on board. I mean, you're barely going to be able to deliver that change it's going to take forever to do that. And so one of the most interesting findings I think people don't talk about is this whole idea of limiting the number of owners that you take on, because you're going to need to make changes in your company to move forward. And so you need to make sure that you can get all of your owners aligned and moving in that direction quickly so you can make quick and efficient changes that are necessary to improve your business.
Wow. And then how did you find the Propus group? Was that just from all those interviews you conducted?
Yeah. So through our network, we have a network of just, various individuals across, each of the industries. And so to be able to speak to, people in the restaurant industry, how do they manage their restaurants? What were their success drivers? Where do they see failures? It was just interesting to learn from different groups across the hospitality industry and to share best practices.
Going back to that kind of XY 45-degree angle, as you go up and the last one was that home rental company that had very little service. So it was super not complicated, but they were able to scale to over 4,000 homes, or I think 4,000 or 40,000. Okay, there we go. 66,000.
66,000. Yeah, they do more midterm and long-term rentals.
I guess you could, in the case study, you also said like extended stay America was also on the road towards that scale. It's limited service, wide geographic, kind of simple, not as complicated.
Well, they own and manage all their, so their management structure is very different. They own and manage all of their hotels, and they are, talk about similar demand drivers, right? These are, they are really targeting the same customer regardless of the location. Another great example is Chick-fil-A, right? They're all over the US, but they are, in high traffic areas of malls and off the highway. They're servicing someone who wants a quick fast food meal. The menu doesn't change.
But they're franchise owned. But it's so hard. I only know anecdotally, but from what I hear, the way that they select for those owner franchisees, like you have to be drinking that Kool-Aid and believing hook, line, and sinker that this is the way and there's no deviation. And it's really interesting how they can recruit and then maintain that, because I don't know, Chick-fil-A is new to me up in the Northeast, but it's the same everywhere and it's good everywhere. And everyone seems really happy working there too. It's crazy.
Yeah. And they have to, their franchisees have to work. It's their full-time job. They have to be in the store or in the restaurant space, full time. So yeah, it's a very strict model of bringing on new franchisees. But yeah, so, and again, their menu doesn't change and they're servicing basically the same customer across the country. So there's really not these varying demand drivers. And so, those are successful models that we have seen be able to scale.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info. Okay, so you created Inhaven first as a founder, entrepreneur, and you were operating the business, and then you did this case study. Was it confirmation bias, or like were you like, okay, we're on the right path, or did it change drastically how you were looking at growth and scale or lack of scale? Like walk us through that.
Yeah, no, from the moment that I started Inhaven, I've had the thesis that property management is a local business. It doesn't scale nationally. And so, the writing was on the wall for Vacasa, even for Sonder. talked about this for years, that business model was going to fail because property management is a local business, right? It's the local boots on the ground. It's those teams that take care of these properties that are able to, they know the local area, they're able to make the best guest recommendations. They're able to find the plumber if there's an issue, right? They are the local boots on the ground.
That's the most important thing, really.
Exactly. Yeah. You need running water. You need flushable toilets. That's really important. So, those are the people that deliver the hospitality locally. And I think what people don't know, at least on the vacation rental side, and maybe it's different on the hotel side, is that when you show up at a Marriott or a Hilton hotel, you are most likely not talking to a Marriott employee, right? You are talking to an employee of that local property manager that's there to deliver hospitality. And so, that is the same on the vacation rental side. And so that is really those local teams that deliver it best. And so it has always been a thesis of mine that you can't scale property management nationally because it's a local business. And it will fail. And so this case study sort of substantiates the whole thesis that I had around Inhaven. And so with the hotel industry, you've got four key stakeholders. You've got the owners of the hotel, you have the property managers, you have the brands, so the Marriotts, Hilton, Hyatts, and then you have the distribution like hotels.com and Expedia. In the vacation rental side of things, you are missing the brand. You've got the owners, you have the property managers, and you have the distribution like Airbnb and Vrbo, but you don't have any of these national brand concepts. And so you've got 20,000+ different property managers trying to communicate to guests, stay with me. And so what we're developing at Inhaven is that national hospitality concept where we work with these property managers to set standards for their bed, bath, and kitchen. So the sleep, bathing, and eating experience. And so if a customer is traveling from, had a great experience in Steamboat Springs, Colorado one winter and wants to, with Movie Mountains, which is one of our property management partners, and wants to go to Park City the next year for a ski, another ski destination. Well, of course, they've got to stay at a boat, right? They're going to have the same level of comfort because they achieved this luxury level of comfort, and they're going to have the same service levels. And so what we're doing is creating that network of property managers that are committed to these standards around the US. So that guests can find these homes and book with more certainty and confidence.
So it's interesting you bring up the bed, bath, and kitchen because I had some friends, and they're still my friends, but they went to go work from hotels to Airbnb, right? It's like, I don't know, I bring up Elon again, but Tesla is a car company, right? But their PE ratio or how they're valued is like in the hundreds on their earnings versus Ford, which is like 6 or 7, or Toyota, which is 7 or 8. Toyota's like the biggest car company, right? So their earnings multiple is like 8, right? Airbnb, they come out of the gate with so many things. They blow out. I think if you were to add up the valuations of all of the different hotel companies, the brands, Airbnb is still valued higher than them, but it's so distributed and they want to have these like unique individual experiences. But as a furniture guy, I talked to my friends. I was like, hey, do you want to like standardize anything? Like, can I make a tray that you put a newspaper in, or a tea service, or like a bookcase in every single Airbnb? And they're like, no, we want everything to be different. It's all about the owner. It's the owner is the host, right? Which I think is kind of cool, but it makes for, I don't know, a very lumpy or volatile guest experience, right? You don't really know what you're going to get into. And it has a time and a place for who you're traveling with, like budget, whatever. But how do you maintain that in bed, bath, and sleeping? And how do you get these management companies and owners to buy into that? And then is it like you have to have so many red wine glasses and this much cutlery or this kind of sheet? Like what are the big ticket or like the big needle movers in there that they have to commit to?
So standards in the vacation rental industry is different than hotels, first of all. You can wake up in a Hyatt in Tokyo or Cincinnati and not know where you are, right? It's very cookie cutter. guests choose vacation rentals because they want to feel like a local, right? They want to go to a beach house and feel like they're on the beach, or a mountain home and feel like they're in the mountains. But they don't want uniqueness when it comes to sleeping, bathing, and eating. They don't want a round bed or a water bed. They want comfortable beds. And so I think
Well, some do.
some do. Yes. People that we're targeting, right? The multi-generational travelers, the families, they want some certainty when it comes to the comfort of the stay.
So that's a very important point, because you're much in the same way when I was talking about that Small Giants book. It's you can either niche down geographically or by that psychographic. I think they call it a psychographic. It's who that customer is. So you just said multi-generational, whatever, like continue, but you have, in order for this to be successful, you're not going after every traveler. You're going after,
Yeah, like I am not, Inhaven is not attractive to my 20-year-old cousin, right? Looking to have an Instagram wall in Nashville. So we are focused on,
unless his grandparents are paying for it.
unless his grandparents are paying for it. That's correct. Yes. But, I think that we are very much focused on professional property managers. So people that are, that this is their full-time job. They have local offices in these destinations. We're very much focused on vacation rental destinations. So we're not focused on Fremont, California, a random suburb in the East Bay, right? These are destinations that people go to for the nature, for the mountains, for the local town, very cute local festival. So these are destinations people travel to, and we're focused on whole homes. So we're not looking at shared bedrooms or a garage. And we're focused on these property managers, so these people that have local offices, local teams on the ground that are really committed to standards. And it was funny because I came at this from a guest perspective, because I've got 4 young kids, and so when we travel, we stay in vacation rentals. We need multiple bedrooms, a kitchen, etc. And I was sick of showing up at vacation rentals where the pictures look great, but the beds were crappy. You pull out the drawer and you'd find like 2 knives and a fork for, a house that slept 6. And so I wanted to address this. And so, we are delivering more certainty to that guest that looks for, they need comfort. They can't enjoy the gathering spaces without getting a good night's sleep. So we are very focused on who we're working with from a professional property manager perspective, where we're focused. So in terms of these destinations that uniqueness is not ever part of their listing description, right? People go to Hilton Head for the beach and the golf. People go to Steamboat to ski and to hike. They don't need to make a home unique to drive people there. So that those are some of the choices that we've made to really go after this audience that we think is looking for more certainty when they're booking their stays.
So you've niched down your geography, you've niched down your management partners, you've niched down your guests, right? And then as you've been growing, what's your biggest hurdle right now to continue to scale, but within those tight guardrails?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because when I started this, I came at it from a guest perspective, but the people that have benefited most from this are actually the property managers, because they can't have different once you get past 20 properties, you can't have different sheets in every property, different coffee makers, like they need to standardize. And so it's really getting them to understand the value of that, because once they see the value, they wish they did this, years ago. They wish they had a linen program in place for their owners and all these different things. So I think it's just getting them over the hurdle of like, what are you doing today? You're running around with your head cut off. You've got all these different things to remember about all these different properties. Let's standardize these areas of the home. But quite frankly, plates break, right? Sheets need to be replaced. There's a lifetime on those sheets. And so this isn't, we're really standardizing the things that are the most replaced things in the home. And so it's really getting them over that hurdle.
I'm sorry. So aside from finding the best managers with the best properties in those geographies that mean the most to you, and then marketing to those multi-generational families that have a certain threshold of expectation, and then for, I guess, the service offering, which could be, like you said, the sheets, the towels, the stemware, plates, napkins. For that part of it, do you become like a GPO, I think it's called, like a group purchasing organization, where you can then help get scale by negotiating better pricing for all those other properties? Like, what's your value prop?
So people use Inhaven to one, set their standards and then shop those standards. So my background's in merchandising. So I've got relationships with the manufacturers around the world, um, and have been able to negotiate, great rates, great pricing on hospitality grade supplies. And so they come to us to replenish those homes. We've got a whole suite of inventory management tools, owner quoting tools that make their businesses more efficient. We alert them when they're running low in supplies that they want to keep in stock in their warehouses or their offices. And so they use us to procure and then replenish those homes. And then the next phase of Inhaven is introducing a guest facing site where guests can come and learn about these homes. We're working on various partnerships with credit card companies. As an example, we know that your credit card points are 30% of the points are used against stays, but mostly it's hotels. Less than 1% of credit card points goes to vacation rentals, and that's because these credit card companies don't trust the inventory. Right? They're not going to have their customers spend 1,000,000 points to have a really crappy stay somewhere. And so we're working with them to bring the Inhaven, that curated inventory onto their site so that they can have the vacation rental offering, because it's over 20% now of lodging spend goes to vacation rentals. So people want to stay in vacation rentals. They just can't trust the inventory out there. And so the fact that we know who these property managers are, what their service levels are, which we haven't really gotten into, but we do know what type of service. We have luxury service where you would see, one team member to every 5 homes versus more of a economy level, which is like one team member to every 15 to 20 homes. So we can gauge their service levels, and then we see what they're buying and putting in these homes. So we know what kind of quality goes into the bed, the bath, the kitchen. And so we can guarantee these types of experiences to these, various partners out there.
And then you are then bringing value by like you're marketing direct to all these multi-generational families that have a certain level of service and quality. And then you're also adding value by finding value aligned management companies and teams, right? And property.
Exactly. Yep. Hmm.
Let's say, and I heard you say mountain, beach. Give me what's a market that you want to get into, but you haven't been into yet?
We're looking at places like Gatlinburg. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now Gatlinburg, super awesome, very specific, draws a lot of people. Let's say you're going to look there. What is what's the big win for you while you survey properties and management companies? Like, if there's a management company out there that's intrigued by what your value prop is, like, what's the psychographic of them? And how many units do they have? Like, who's your ideal management company in and around Gatlinburg? Let's say.
Yeah. So it's anyone that manages anywhere between 20 to about 1,000 properties max, as like our ideal sweet spot. And so it's a management team that have a local team there that their full-time job is to care for these properties. So we're looking for that local office, local team, boots on the ground. This isn't a co-host or a host that lives 300 miles away. This is a full-time profession for them, and they've got full operations in that market. And then what we do is we work with them to sort of understand, what are they purchasing today? What are the standards they set there for their homes today? Because most of these companies have some level of standards in their homes. And then we look at, okay, well, this is where we would make changes, or this is where we would make improvements. And so we then, and we tour their homes, we tour their warehouses, we understand their operations, and then they purchase from us for about 6 to 12 months before we would consider them. So we can see their purchase patterns, what they're putting in the homes, what they're allocating to their homes.
Oh, interesting. So you're actually you're starting off with them saying, "Hey, we have this menu of sleep, eat, bathe. Try it out," and then you get to kind of see they kind of commit to you by purchasing from you, but then you get to see how much they're doing, and then also I'm sure you're looking at guest feedback and all that other stuff, correct?
Yeah. And, it's sort of like, I think what this industry is missing is the trust is completely missing from the vacation rental industry. So you can't just buy a big box and put a Marriott sign on and call it a Marriott, right? There are standards that you need to adhere to. And so we're helping them understand, okay, here, if you want to call yourself luxury, here are the types of standards that are in luxury homes, from the bedding to the number of dinner plates or number of wine glasses in the home, so the par levels. We're helping them get to that level if they're not already, or just standardizing across their homes if they've got, all these different products in all the homes. And then we sort of watch them and work with them, and we become an extension of their team. And then we can say, okay, you're ready to have this sort of badge at Inhaven Stay, where we would feel comfortable marketing you to guests or to our, credit card partners.
So in a way, you're not signing them on fully at the beginning, right? So there's a way to kind of test how you deliver them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But as you're, let's say, I like the idea of Gatlinburg, like you find someone who has 20 to 4,000 units. You like, what's the biggest kind of pushback you get from them? It's like, oh, if I were them, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to like change my supply chain again. Like what are the things that you hear like as resistance? And then once you do establish that beachhead, what are the testimonials you'll hear? Like what's the before and what's the after?
Yeah, I mean, I think the property management is one of the hardest jobs, right? It's a 24/7 thing. They've got lean teams. They're running around with their heads cut off, right? And they've got guests calling, owners calling. They're trying to appease all these different groups. So it's really just having them set time to change their processes. We will most likely guarantee a significant savings, right? Because they're not getting access to this whole distribution of wholesale, and then they're buying better products that are just more durable. So they typically start with us with like one room. They might say, okay, we'll do kitchen with you. And then they see how much efficiencies they gain by using our inventory management tool, by working with our team, that then they kind of say, all right, we'll move on to bedrooms or bathrooms. And so really it's this, they start out with one area sort of testing us, and then we expand and, to cover all three areas. We also do cleaning as well. So all the cleaning supplies, to make sure they're maintaining those standards as well. And so it's really just, usually it's a testing one area of the home and standardizing across that area. And then we move on to the other areas. And that's really, I mean, that's how a lot of our customers have started. And that's, we get so much feedback that they just wish that they had gone and to do it all from the start, with us, once they, trust our team and see the type of value that we add and the type of processes we can help improve.
So when you're kind of evaluating management / operators in, like, let's just say Gatlinburg again, are you set up meetings? Are you sharing with them the case study that's I find so fascinating? Or like, how do you do it? Like, how are you walking through those initial meetings? And because where I want to go with this question is, we can use Gatlinburg or the entire United States or world. If every operator or property management company read this case study or had you walk them through it, what do you think would change immediately?
I think they would think differently about scaling, the whole idea of scaling. And I think, a lot of people that we've spoken to, a lot of these local property managers, that are, one woman we talked to in Hilton Head Island, who was a great business there, managed about 70 properties in Hilton Head. They were like, well, why don't you expand to another beach town nearby, Myrtle Beach or whatever? And she was like, some people are pushing me to expand my business there, but I don't know anyone there locally. I mean, it's not that far away, but I would have to build out my whole team. And so it's almost like it's validating to these local property managers that, like, yes, I'm going to introduce more complexity to my business, and I have a very profitable and a very successful business locally. And so a lot of people have said this just validates me not, jumping on this bandwagon of bigger is better and I need to scale and grow at all possible costs.
I would say that that owner of that management company is unique. And I'm sure that there are many others like her. It was a her, yeah. In the sense that many people, when they get going, they're like, oh, I have to grow. I have to grow. And then it introduces all this other complexity. I talked to another group who invests in restaurants as they want to scale. And so if they have 5 or 10 locations, I was like, how do you start that conversation? Well, he's like, first, we hear that they want to scale, so they come for us if we can help them raise equity and debt so that we can get them on this path to scale. But in like, I forgot how long, but in those first few months while we're getting to know them, we're talking to the owner and trying to talk them out of scaling. Like, why do you really like your life is going to change? Are you sure you really want to do this? And they wind up talking out a lot of people. Do you have to? I guess you're doing the opposite. Well, I guess you're doing what they're doing, but they want people they want to find restaurateurs who want to grow, and they're like, no, no, no. But you're actually looking for people who are like, no, I have a good thing going. I want to make it better.
Exactly. They just want to improve. And maybe they're investing locally. They're just building the number of properties they have locally. But again, as long as they're following that rubric of similar guest demand drivers, we see problems even locally. Like if you're on Hilton Head and you're trying to service luxury homes and economy homes, right? You have two different guests that you're trying to target. That requires different marketing strategies and whatnot, and it adds more complexity to your team. So, I think a lot of our successful property managers have grown. They've grown from 50 units to 200, but they've been very focused on the type of unit they bring on. They've been very curated, and they've really been very picky with the type of owners they're bringing onto their platform.
Wow. Okay, so stepping outside of Gatlinburg and just looking at the map or the globe, um, what's next for Inhaven, and how are you planning to scale and not wind up into that diseconomy of scale trap?
Yeah. So it's really on. We're now, we've got these homes that are fully standardized, and now we want to get more distribution, more eyeballs on these homes, and so we are moving into more of the B2C business as well, going direct to guests through various partnerships with hotel companies to bring this set of inventory that is extremely curated, extremely trustworthy to these various companies so that they can, be able to provide more vacation rental options to their customers. So it's really moving into this B2C world. And we couldn't have started there because we needed to first vet and verify that these property management companies were committed to these standards and were delivering on the service levels that they say they're delivering on.
I love the story. I love the case study. I love your path, and I love how you're kind of everything is about creating these hard boundaries about not going outside because you want to deliver on what your promise is.
Hmm. Exactly.
And so many people lose that. And then coming back to the Sonder story, we scheduled this before last week or a couple of weeks ago, but just last week, Paolo Ferrari and his team, they won Designer of the Year at the Gold Key Awards, I believe. And the morning that they were getting their award for hospitality, like Hospitality Designer of the Year, many of them were staying at the Sonder, I forget which one, in Manhattan, and they were told that morning they had to vacate the premises. On this great, joyous day, celebrating their excellence in hospitality. I'm sorry to laugh, guys, but they got kicked out, and they were supposed to be there for another couple days. And when I heard that story that night, we had a party after to celebrate all the winners and finalists. I couldn't believe that actually happened. So much in the same way that I wish every budding entrepreneur would read the book Small Giants, what is your advice to every budding entrepreneur that wants to grow, grow, grow?
Read the case study.
Learn the words diseconomy of scale.
Learn the word diseconomies of scale. Read the case study. I mean, this is a culmination of hundreds of interviews with top executives across these industries and their lessons learned. And I feel like it is just a gift to anyone that is looking to scale in property management. Read, learn from these people, learn from their successes and their failures, and to make better decisions for the future of your business. So
I would even say don't limit that reading that case study to just the entrepreneurial property managers. I'm saying any entrepreneur should read that and get and understand that. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So based on that, and if people wanted to learn more about you or Inhaven or get a copy of that case study, and we'll do our best to drop the slides in here that we were referring to. What's a good way for them to learn more about you and Inhaven?
Yeah, you can always reach out, email me at ashley@inhaven.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Would love to hear from you and just talk further. It's a fascinating case study, but it's something that we continue to evolve and learn from more people that are in the industry. So I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested.
Yeah, and I was so taken by it. I was even at the I emceed this it's called Radical Innovation ceremony in New York City. And there was a professor from UNLV, Glenn, who I'd met on calls. And I think I know I'd met him in the past as well. And I was telling him about this diseconomy of scale. He's like, that's fascinating. And he's a teacher of hospitality. And so I think I connected him with you somehow. So I'm sure a meeting is happening. But it's really fascinating. And I think growth for the sake of growth, having learned the hard way, um, there's a better way. There is a better way. So, Ashley, I appreciate you so much and sharing the story and letting us geek out on this. And thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for having me on. I appreciate your time too.
And also to all of our listeners, one of the things that excites me so much about doing this every week is I'm always learning. This quenches my curiosity. And I feel like I always walk away from every conversation better. Um, there's so much in this one and in this case study. So I definitely suggest downloading it, check it out. And this is why I do this. So if this changed your idea of hospitality or scale or not scaling hospitality, please like it, subscribe, and don't forget, we grow a lot by word of mouth. So Pat, if you know someone who could benefit from this, a property manager, a management company, other budding entrepreneur, please send it to them. I think that it's something that I wish I knew 20 something years ago. So thank you all. Like, subscribe, pass it on, and we'll catch you next time.